Dina Rivera. In this Savvy Broadcasting series, we delve into hot topics affecting us all. With cancel culture and big tech censoring any opposing ideas and thoughts outside of mainstream ideology, it has become more important than ever that we tell the raw truth about everything from U.S. world politics, COVID, Christianity, and everything in between. We invite all points of view to come and share their perspective honestly and respectfully. Hello, Dr. Aaron Hartman. Welcome to Savvy's latest series, Forbidden Speech. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fabulous. I'm so grateful to have you here today. We have had other doctors on that are in the functional health arena. And before we get started, if some people have missed our past episodes with doctors of such, I'd like for them to understand what is integrative or functional medicine. Let's start there. What is that?
I mean, basically, functional medicine is looking at the root cause, not just the diagnosis, but what actually causes things. So, if someone has diabetes, traditional model would be here are the medications you use: metformin, Victoza, whatever. And an integrated functional medicine model, the question is, why do you have diabetes? Is it from your untreated heavy metals, from mercury in your mouth, sleep apnea? Is it chemical diabetes? You're in the military, you're at Vietnam, and it's actually from chemical buildup in your body. So, not just treating the symptoms we see, but actually getting to the root cause and addressing the underlying fundamentals in people's health.
I love that, Aaron. Let me first ask, do you like Dr. Hartman or Aaron? How do you like
It,
to be addressed?
it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. So, some people have a preference. But Dr. Hartman, what I like about that is that some people say, well, I barely eat sweets. So how the heck did I get diabetes? And what I like what you're saying there is that you go to the root cause, because whatever ultimate disease you might get, people come at that disease in different ways. It's not always the same way.
Correct. Yeah. And the thing about functional medicine, some people call it precision medicine or personalized medicine, where I'm actually diving into their issues. You mentioned diabetes. A lot of slender females in their 60s are pre-diabetic and diabetic because of neuroendocrine disruptors or chemicals in the environment that mess with the hormones. That includes plastics. It also includes a lot of personal healthcare items. It includes pesticides. And so, again, not just giving them metformin to get their A1C to come down, but actually, why do they have whatever's going on? And that's the fundamental principle that underlies functional medicine.
I love that because I had been diagnosed pre-diabetic. I've worked on my diet and I've now exercised. I've gotten it under control. But yeah, I hadn't even thought that, something not just sugar related could
Yeah,
be a possibility. So that's great
absolutely.
to know. Now, but today we're going to focus on something very important and people are really worried about because we've been talking about it for 2 years, COVID. But you're
Oh
going
my
to
gosh.
help people with vitamin deficiencies and tips on how they might combat COVID. Instead of being scared in the corner, there's tips and things that people can do to arm themselves. So let's go there. What are some of the things people can do?
I mean, the biggest thing right now is vitamin D deficiency, which I've been talking about since 2003, 2004. Um, Vitamin D deficiency is the single biggest nutritional factor associated with severe COVID. Zinc deficiency in the elderly, about 42% to 48% of elderly are deficient in zinc. B vitamin deficiencies, 40 to 60% of the population is deficient in any one B vitamin. When you add them all together, everybody's deficient in at least one B vitamin. So, like getting in those basic, that's like the basic nutritional stuff. And then there's even a deeper dive into other factors like gut health. There was some recent data that got published this past about 2 weeks ago, restating what was originally published 2 years ago, which that the bacteria in your gut, also referred to as a gut microbiome, sets people up for severe COVID as well as long COVID. So if someone's
Yeah.
dealing with long COVID or symptoms of their COVID for more than 12 weeks, then their gut actually probably is one of the setups, one of the antecedents, as we refer to them in the functional medicine world, the things that come before whatever's going on now. And so those are just a couple of the basic things that everybody who's had COVID, has long COVID, are going to get it. And the reality is with Omicron, the B.1.1, the B.1.2, your audience may be familiar with the Omicron version 2. These things are getting less serious and more infectious, which means we're all eventually going to get this, whether you've had it yet or not. If you had the vaccine before or had Delta, like I had Delta, you're probably going to get these other versions because this is turning into a regular good old fashioned coronavirus. And people don't realize that 30% of upper respiratory tract infections during a typical flu season are coronavirus. and 15% of head colds are a coronavirus. It's just now we know about the SARS-CoV-2, which is a very particular brand of coronavirus.
So is the common cold of yesteryear in the same arena as the COVID
Oh, absolutely,
thing?
yeah.
Oh,
Coronaviruses are typical head cold viruses. It's just that this
oh.
particular one, SARS-CoV-2,
Mhm,
was really bad for about it had lethality of 0.3%, which is
mhm,
pretty bad, you know?
mhm.
Well, it's reverting to the mean, just like the stock market goes up, it comes down, but the reversion to the mean, if it's about 7% returns over 40 to 50 years, right?
Mhm,
Same thing with H1N1 in 1918 and 1920. Well, H1N1 is the normal flu these days, but it
mhm,
was Spanish flu, 100 years ago. This is what happens with these things. They come out and they basically, as they are novel or new, our immune
mhm,
systems don't know what to do, but as they mix with the viruses, and that looks like the Omicron actually came from mice. So actually,
mhm,
and the B.1.2, which is Omicron version 2, looks like it
mhm,
developed separately from the first Omicron and actually is actually now overpowering the first Omicron, which is just this happens usually. What happens is
mhm.
these things mix. As they mix, they tend to become less lethal. And that's what we've seen since right before Christmas.
I'm curious because I've heard people say, "Oh, I've got this virus. Just give me some antibiotics." Now, antibiotics is like, well, they take care of bacterias. So, what is the difference? What exactly is a virus? Is it like a machine? What is it?
Well, a virus is a piece of nuclear material. They can be
Mhm,
DNA viruses or RNA viruses, and
mhm,
they invade our body, invade our cells, and take over the machinery of the cells. So they
mhm.
almost like are parasites, but they're parasites that are basically made of small amino acids. They come into
Oh,
a cell and they take over the machinery, and then that your cell starts making these viral particles that then it get exported by your cell to the rest of your body. Versus a
mhm.
bacteria is a single cell organism that can survive on its own that
Oh,
invades. So bacteria tend to live outside of cells, not
mhm,
100%, but that's basically why. And viruses actually invade in the cells and are much smaller. Um,
uh-huh.
and you have different parts of the immune system that are wired to deal more with the innate or viral part, and then bacteria like the antibodies. So, and of course, your immune system mixes. There's different. It's not as clear cut as people talk about it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a now when it comes to vitamins, I've heard that a lot vitamin D is really impactful for not getting a lot of illnesses. What is so important about vitamin D? What is it like? I've heard that you get some from the sun and
Yeah.
why is it so important for
The,
our
the, the
body?
question the question is, what does vitamin D not do? And is what is vitamin D not important for? It's a hormone.
Mm.
Actually, it's not a
Oh,
vitamin, it's a hormone.
I didn't
And
know
it
that.
helps. Yeah, yeah. It's actually we named the vitamins like the first one vitamin A, second one, vitamin B. We were not very intuitive with these. And so D was actually originally thought to be another vitamin we're finding out, but it's actually a hormone.
Oh,
And one of the many, many things vitamin D does is it helps your innate immune system, which is the part of your body that fights off viruses and cancers,
mm,
take these particles and hand it off to the adaptive part of the immune system that makes antibodies. So everybody knows about antibodies these days, right? We have to have enough D for the part that captures the particles to hand it off to the part that makes antibodies to those particles. D is pivotal for that transition. And if your
wow.
D levels are low, it's going to slow that transition. So it's going to slow your body's antibody response.
Wow. So it's kind of like helping in the defense systems. And if that's not there,
Right.
it kind of doesn't relay the message. So our defenses can come to the rescue and start
Uh,
working on it. Kind of,
Absolutely.
sort of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what's the best way to get the most efficient vitamin? Because I don't think all vitamins are equal. Is there a way to know that you're getting good vitamins that can actually make an impact, or is there some better than others? What's your idea on that?
I mean, it's the saying you get what you pay for. I've kind of turned in you don't get what you don't pay for. And so it's like if you're getting a vitamin D that is in soy oil, and soy is actually one of the most allergenic foods in our country. Most vitamin Ds you buy in a store actually are in a soy.
Yeah.
Um, it's there's a big quality difference with vitamins. There's an issue with different extraction methods and the
Mhm,
stuff. And so you want to get a pharmaceutical grade, clean nutrient, whatever it is, whether it's a B
mhm,
vitamin, D, E, C, minerals, whatever. There's a
mhm.
25% of all calcium supplements you buy in your typical store have lead in them. And
Whoa.
20%, yeah, exactly. And 20% of that lead is over the EPA's allowable safe level for food, right? So if you're a female taking calcium, for example, which you shouldn't be, by the way, but if you were for bone health, odds are you're getting some lead in it.
Mm.
And so the thing about you want to get a clean product, someone's testing it before they mix the vitamins up, when they make an after. And those are usually considered pharmaceutical grade supplements. And so you have to kind of know where they are. I've got on my
Mhm.
website, I've got a whole bunch of
Oh.
resources for people to get those. I make recommendations. I make specific brand recommendations because I might tell you to
Mhm.
get a B vitamin, right? Here's a great example. Go get some B12. And you're like, well, B12 is great for nerve function. You're deficient in a lot of elderly. So you go
Mhm.
buy a cheap B complex that has cyanocobalamin, which is a cyanide molecule with cobalamin. And
Hmm.
cyanide sounds not so good, right?
No.
But small amounts are okay for you, right?
Hmm.
Well, not really, no. But anyway, that's what you'll
Okay.
buy. That's what you'll get. And you want actually a methylcobalamin or hydroxylcobalamin. Well, that's a safe
I've
natural
heard of
form.
hydroxyl. I've heard of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
methyl, and there's adenosine. So there's different kinds of natural occurring cobalamin or B12. You don't want the cyanocobalamin. And so if you get a typical B complex, it's going to have that cyanocobalamin or that cyanide molecule with
Mhm.
basically cobalt in this thing, which is cobalt's one of the metals that's actually in B12. And so
Interesting.
something as simple as B12 can have different effects based on which one you're getting.
Now, this is interesting to me, because I've been working on eating and getting nutrition through the food I'm eating, but I've heard that a lot of the food that we're growing isn't as nutritious as it used to be because the ground isn't, I don't know, is mineralistic. I don't know the word.
Yeah.
Is there a way that you can eat all your vitamins, or do you really suggest that people have to get supplements?
The thing about it is ideally you get all your nutrition through your food, absolutely. But when you
Mhm.
start looking at how we process our food,
Mm.
all the whole everything that goes into the stressors in our environment, our environment's totally different than it was 300 years ago. We're breathing combusted petroleum products.
Mm.
Plastics, which I mentioned before, are
Mm.
petroleum that's made from a liquid into a solid. Those are actually kind of toxic, and so we actually need more nutrition now than we likely did 300 to 400 years ago. So
Wow.
ideally, it'd be food first, food forward. Food should always be your go-to, absolutely. But
Mhm.
the reality is 40 to 60% of Americans are deficient in a B vitamin, 42% of the elderly are deficient in zinc. 40% of Americans are deficient in D, 82% of African Americans are deficient in D. So the thing about it is can you drink enough milk to get D? And the answer is I calculate it's about a gallon a day.
Oh, no.
So exactly, and if you're not out in the sun, full body exposure, and when I say full body, I mean full body
You
exposure.
mean naked?
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say full body, and you can translate that
All
however you want.
right.
Full body, okay? But for 20 to 30 minutes on both sides, like,
Whoa.
you're not gonna make enough D.
Mm.
Well, who does that? And so you probably need to we all probably need to supplement D. We probably all need some C. We probably all need trace minerals, which all the processing of foods strips out the magnesium, the trace minerals, the zinc, the manganese, the strontium, the silica, boron.
Mhm.
These are actually things that are important for women for bone health, right? Women,
Mm.
osteoporosis. Well, when we're consuming foods that are acidic and processed, it sets you up
Mhm.
for metabolic things like gout, kidney stones, osteoporosis.
Oh, no, don't like that. I'm getting
Yeah.
older. Don't want that. Now, I joined a place called Stem Lift around here, and what's really cool about it is I go to cryo this chamber
Yeah.
that's supposed to help with recovery, but they offer like vitamins that you can inject. And
IV valve,
like,
yeah.
yeah, well, not just vitamin B, but like you can ask what mixture you want, like
Yeah.
some zinc or la 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 la. Do you think that is kind of helpful to get the jam really quick, or is it best to stay with vitamin? I'm just
Well,
curious.
the IV I actually use in my clinic. I'll actually use IV nutrition in some of
Oh.
my really sick patients. There's great literature on IV vitamin C and its use when people are really chronically ill.
Hmm.
One of the local critical care doctors in Virginia, Dr. Merrick, did some original research on IV vitamin C in sepsis patients in the ICU, showing it lowered the risk of death 80%. So there's really good use for this. But ideally, you'd get your levels checked and see what you need and get an
Mhm.
evaluation. A lot of these boutique places are more like general health and wellness, and the doses of the
Mm.
vitamin C are actually not super high. They're maybe 5 or 8 grams.
Mhm.
When I do with patients, I'll be doing 25, 30, 50 grams. I'll do a lot more. And to put that in perspective, a typical, vitamin C pills, 250 to 500 milligrams. So we're talking about, 10, 20, 30 fold more. But when you realize that vitamin C is important for a lot of anti-inflammatory activity, it has anti-cancer, antiviral
Mm.
properties. It's really a powerful nutrient. And so those things can be useful, but ideally you'd be working with someone who'd figure out stuff. And it wouldn't be just like, it's like, the whole thing of functional medicine. You're saying, I'm going to go to this place that's going to give the exact same IV to the last 30 people who came through here, right? It's like, it's good, it's
Yeah.
helpful, but it's not personalized, it's not
Yeah.
precise.
Yeah. So I'm thinking when they come to your office, you'd probably have to do a full workup and
Yeah,
blood test to figure out exactly where they're at so you can figure out how to help them.
absolutely. Yeah, lots of
Mhm.
labs.
Yeah, exactly. So, but now let's say someone has gotten the COVID. What do they do to start to recover? What would be some of your tips to get them back on the recovery road?
Okay. Well, I mean, with COVID's a virus. It's
Mhm.
we have already lots of data about being on the right dose of C and zinc,
Mm.
N-acetylcysteine or NAC. We have great data. It's something we've been using with patients with cystic fibrosis for decades.
Mm.
Cystic fibrosis is a severe lung disease. NAC has great antiviral activity against influenza as well. And that's from Swiss data. So that's a great nutrient. There are things like quercetin, which is a
Mm.
plant flavonoid. Quercetin's like nature's hydroxychloroquine.
Oh, wow.
Not to be political and get kind of off on that, but it does the same thing as hydroxychloroquine does. It actually helps
Oh.
zinc get into your cells. When I don't know if I mentioned, I figure I've done a couple interviews today. I don't know if I
Yeah.
mentioned mast cell activation.
Mm-mm.
Also, basically, part of COVID is actually a mast cell activation syndrome,
Hmm.
which is one of the reasons why Claritin and Pepcid and Zyrtec and Pepcid are used for severe COVID, right? Where quercetin is a natural mast cell stabilizer. And oh, by the way, quercetin helps with your gut health. It helps with leaky gut. So it's a nice
Ah.
nutrient that does a whole lot of different things.
Can you get it
Um,
in food, by the way?
well,
That
yeah,
particular thing?
quercetin naturally comes from onions and apples.
Ooh, I love
So
onions.
yeah,
I'm guessing not fried though. No fried people.
no, no fried onions, no.
Yeah, but I love that because when I was younger, I was having if I would get sicker, I would have a little echinacea, vitamin C. But what we realized is original medicine was herbs and the stuff from the ground, mushrooms and the soups you put together and bone broth. Those were the natural remedies. And then later on, they went in the lab and they kind of made synthetic versions of a lot of the stuff that we get from nature.
Actually, most pharmaceutical research is you'll like look at 1,000 compounds, and these are natural compounds, and
Mhm.
they'll say of 1,000 compounds, these 20 or 30 have potential for a drug, and they'll kind of then take those from bench
Mhm.
science and start doing animal research on it. And if the
Mhm.
animal research pans out, then they'll get a molecule and say, well, this is the most likely of all these thousands of things we looked at to patent and turn into a drug. And that process can take 10 or 20 years. It's a long process, but you have to realize that almost 90+% of our drugs originate in the world. You figure
Mhm.
penicillin originally came from a mold.
Mhm.
Cyclosporin, which is one of the very first successful anti organ rejection medications, came from mold. You realize, yeah, it's statins,
Wow.
cholesterol medications actually originally came from mold. Red rice yeast. It's a mold. Like that's where it originally came
Mm.
from. And so a lot of drugs actually originated in the natural world. It's just to pharmaceuticalize it and to patent it, you have to kind of find the molecule,
Mm.
then do the studies, and then you give it a name. You give it some weird name usually, and then but these things typically originate in in the world, and a lot of the
Mhm.
biologics we're using now for cancers and things, they're actually designed around natural molecules in our body to block them. So using these natural mechanisms and creating things your body would make, and they're creating synthetics of that. So ultimately,
Mhm.
all these things we do, we're just using the body's chemistry and our knowledge of it to create
Mhm.
molecules to pharmaceuticalize or have a higher potential, which
Yeah.
in the integrated functional medicine world, we'll do that with fish
Mm.
oil. There's data that 5,000 milligrams a day of fish oil can actually be as effective to treat rheumatoid arthritis
Wow.
as Humira.
You said fish oil, right?
I said fish oil, correct? Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Because my husband has, rheumatoid arthritis, so
Mm.
thank you. Yeah, but this has been great. I know we could go on, and you could help a lot of people with many more issues, but let them go to your facility and find out more about you so they can do that. How can they do that?
Well, you can just go visit my website, which is richmondfunctionalmedicine.com, or Google my name, Aaron Hartman, MD, Richmond Functional Medicine. I've got a bunch of educational resources there. I believe education, if half of all chronic disease can directly be attributed to eating processed foods, then really what most people can do for themselves is get educated. So I have a lot of free educational
Mhm.
resources on there, blogs, a reading list of books to read. So it's
Mhm.
really just a resource for education for people to learn about this kind of medicine, how to apply it to themselves.
That's great. And so everyone can get empowered from any disease out there and empower themselves to keep healthy. And Dr. Hartman, I just have to thank you again for coming to Savvy Broadcasting's Forbidden Speech and sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate it.
You betcha. Take care. Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more Forbidden Speech or Savvy episodes, visit savvybroadcasting.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, Email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.